Good afternoon, Shah. We live? Right. Welcome everyone. I am Councillor Lee Hunt, Cabinet Member for Resources. This meeting is being webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble in front of Queen Victoria's statue in Guildhall Square. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the desk should sign out when leaving the building. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact this meeting will be live streamed. Everyone speaking will be on camera. Members of the press and public are permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everybody use the microphones and remember to switch them off when they have finished. So as I said, we're going to go around the table. We'll start with Democratic Services.
Alison Harper, Democratic Services.
Alison, could you just speak closer to the microphone?
Alison Harper, Democratic Services.
And Steve Bell, Regulatory Services.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not getting this. Is there any way it can be turned up a little bit?
I'll try and speak a bit louder. Steve Bell, Regulatory Services. Is that better?
Well, if I turned it up here, it would help, wouldn't it? All right. Sorry, go again.
Yeah, Steve Bell, Regulatory Services.
Shah.
Asghar Shah, Councillor for Cosham.
And Councillor George Magic of the Paulsgrove Ward.
All right. Thank you for being here. And I have apologies from Councillor Swan, who is the Conservative Opposition spokesperson, who's not coming today. Are there any interests of members in this particular matter? Any interest? No, no interest. So there we are. We have one item on the agenda today, which is the provision of community funerals. Steve, could you introduce the report, please?
Thank you, councillors, and thank you for the opportunity to present the paper. The purpose of the report is to provide clarity, information, and the demands placed upon the Council's community funeral framework and the impacts of such. The recommendations before the panel are providing a community funeral in a professional manner with decency, decorum, and respect, to acknowledge the stresses placed upon the service with the continuing high demand for community funerals, and to approve of the manner in which community funerals are delivered, and to note the financial pressures incurred from delivering this function. Local authorities have had legal responsibility for making arrangements for their deceased since the days of the plague, where the primary concern was to stop the spread of the disease. When a person passes away in Portsmouth and there is no one willing to take responsibility for them, the council is legally responsible to initially pay for and arrange the funeral. Prior to this, our team will try to locate surviving relatives or friends, and if they are willing, they may take over the arrangements. However, if not, we take on all aspects of the funeral. The function is delivered primarily by a small dedicated team in regulatory services, sometimes delivering the service on behalf of other services such as adult social care under a service level agreement. After the funeral has been completed, regulatory services will claim the costs back from the deceased estate if there are sufficient funds. It should be noted that sometimes a third party will make arrangements with other funeral directors and expect the council service to take over or reimburse them when they have already entered into a binding contract. This is significant when there are insufficient funds in the estate, and why we must have clear and consistent policies in place for such circumstances. The Government Social Fund can assist with funeral costs made to claimants with limited income subject to means testing. The duty is placed upon the local authority under the Public Health Control of Disease Act 1984. Local authorities have a legal duty not to cremate a body where they have reason to believe that cremation would be contrary to the wishes of the deceased. Whilst not legally required to, we try to accommodate any wishes made known for the deceased, including religious requirements where possible. Our key pointers for the service are as follows: ensuring the deceased are treated with dignity and respect, minimising public health risks, particularly pertinent during the pandemic, and consideration of the bereaved, and finding next of kin where possible and keeping them informed of arrangements, and recouping costs for the taxpayer where possible, and having clear and transparent processes so all know what to expect from the service. From 2014, Portsmouth NHS Trust stopped burial services for patients that pass away in hospital. This service has been taken on by the council. This has had a significant impact on the service dealing with the deceased from hospitals, which service a catchment area of 2 million. This places the level of community funerals significantly higher on Portsmouth Council than other councils offering a similar service without a major hospital in their area. The council does not deal with anyone that passes away outside of their boundary area. Service referrals are continually high, as in the table 1 in the report. The number of funerals delivered is also recorded and can be contrasted to the referrals, which highlights the number of cases where we've been able to contact the next of kin or similar, and they have agreed to take on the responsibility for the funeral. The demand is due to relatives not being prepared or able to accept the responsibility, or sadly there being no one available to help. The council is mindful of the costs of delivering community funerals, as it is ultimately the taxpayer who foots the bill. Costs can only be claimed if there are sufficient funds in the estate, and it is a complex and time-consuming process. Frequently, the estates of the deceased do not have sufficient funds, and this cost must be met by the council. Resources are currently 0.6 of a full-time equivalent to cover this function, which is supplemented by other officers in regulatory services, which in turn places a burden upon those other services. The average cost of a community funeral is £1,814. This has increased significantly recently due to the procurement process for a contracted funeral director. We are often asked why we don't use genealogical researchers, or so-called hair hunters. They are interested in community funerals as there is a financial incentive for them. The reasons why we do not use them are summarised. It's deciding which one to use. There would need to be a procurement process. The application of finder's fees. Some companies charge a significant percentage of the estate, and there are moral considerations with the council endorsing such practices. And the authority to act on behalf of the local authority. And also ensuring all relatives are met, or entitlements of relatives are met for the estate, and the ability to verify evidence and claims, all of which may take considerable work and could cause delays to proceedings. For relatives claiming estates, the council adopts a similar approach to the Central Government Legal Department, the GLD. Any interested party with a claim would need to provide documented evidence to prove entitlement to such a claim. This must be the first claim received as detailed by legislation. With regard to the future, we are mindful that a community funeral is a last resort after reasonable inquiries have been made of relatives and similar parties. The council acknowledges that known relatives will be contacted asking why they are unwilling or unable to make funeral arrangements, and also if there are any religious beliefs so that we can facilitate these. The council, where possible, will make all appropriate decisions for the funeral based on the best information available at that time. This includes the type of funeral, the deceased and relatives' wishes, religious beliefs, and the treatment of ashes. Other costs, such as headstones and shrines, will not be met unless the cost of the funeral has been met. And where appropriate, a full cost recovery administration charge will be claimed from the estate of the deceased. Statutory duties must be met, as discussed. Council staff do have legal authority to enter a deceased person's property to search for a will and/or property to assist in the funding of the funeral and the tracing of a next of kin. Demands are significant on the service, so the ability to recover costs is key. Currently, the service is budgeted to cover a deficit based on an 83% cost recovery basis. Any additional demand must be met from within the service budget. And that concludes my sort of brief outline into the community funerals service. Just to add, there were some queries I think asked for at the briefings regarding the publication in MIS of the deceased, and also the breakdown of funeral directors' costs. And I believe these were answered by Richard Lee, but I'm also happy to summarise those if you wish. Otherwise, that concludes my summary. Right, just bear with me. And I'll find the email. So I think the question was about the publication in MIS, and I think the issue for consideration there is that it's a very delicate subject, and I think sometimes if the information gets out into the community, relatives are sometimes embarrassed by their inability of sufficient funds to pay for a funeral. And I think the other the consideration is that we're very mindful of the time between when we get notified and we've made all the necessary arrangements and then the funeral. And I think with the best will in the world, people that are trying to locate relatives, there has to be a shut-off time. So that we can still hold the decent burial within a reasonable amount of time. So I think those were our concerns about the publication in the MIS, so that members may be able to assist. And I believe the other issue was the breakdown of the costs, which I have here and I can read out. Yeah. Okay, so the breakdown of the 1,800. In summary, to provide services and arrangements for the burial. This will include liaison with third parties as necessary, such as partner authorities and friends, family of the deceased, the collection of the deceased from the QA hospital mortuary or other locality as necessary to the local mortuary. To our contracted mortuary. In such cases, a closed vehicle, not an open vehicle, is to be used for these removals. The collection of the deceased out of normal working hours as necessary. Care of the deceased from point of collection to the funeral. The provision of a coffin suitable for the purpose of burial to include a nameplate and other necessary furniture. A glass-sided hearse to take the deceased to the cemetery. And they are advised, the funeral director is advised on occasions burials may take place outside the boundary of Portsmouth. All necessary funeral staff and professional liveried pallbearers. Appropriate religious services at the graveside for all burials, the cemetery fee, the provision of administrative and financial staff. Coffins shall be accompanied by a floral tribute where appropriate. Other requirements are organised as defined by us, for example, where the deceased has a military background, that should be covered by the appropriate ensign, where family ashes are requested to be placed within the coffin, or where toys or photos are likewise requested to be placed within the coffin. And then just to summarise those, professional services provided by the funeral director are £200, the coffin £200, the hearse fee £200, transportation costs, including bringing the deceased into the care of the funeral director, £275, the cemetery costs are £729, the minister fee is £70, and the pallbearer fee is £240. And again, that's an example of the actual cost to facilitate the funeral. And again, if I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. I suspect that Shah will want to ask about some community, especially around about on page 13, 12.2, where we're talking about the beliefs or the religion of the individual. Which is partly addressed at paragraph 12.2. I wanted to tease out this business about taking on the responsibility of people who pass away, which Portsmouth ratepayers assume, for people presumably who go to QA from Ferrum or Havant or Gosport, for example, and we take on that responsibility. Is there any attempt to talk to those local authorities about paying for the community funeral, or at least paying part of it?
We have had discussions, Councillor, and unfortunately, I think that other authorities have basically said to us, it's within your jurisdiction, so you are therefore responsible. That there has been no offer of financial support from other authorities who I believe obviously have their own financial pressures.
Indeed. Right then. Any questions? Shah?
Just in regards to to take the responsibility by other local authorities, like as you mentioned about Gosport or Ferrum, etc. Obviously, we have this hospital, which is obviously for the whole area, not only for Portsmouth. So I don't know how they can say we won't take any responsibility for their people. They are from that area. District means obviously we will covering not only Portsmouth, we will cover the whole area, and obviously the money, the funds is going to go from Portsmouth City Council, not from the whole area. So I think that needs to be, maybe that can be discussed with them, because that every authority responsibility.
Yeah.
And in regards to the community, I did mention before actually, when the community will know sometimes, obviously, like as a council, I don't know if there is someone passed away. I didn't receive any information in the last 2 or 3 weeks since we had that meeting. So my point was only to raise if that can be that can be communicated to at least to the councillors, not the community, to councillors, and then we means I can find out which community, and then I can investigate where the next of kin we can find, or the community can take responsibility. If not, then obviously city council is there to help them.
Okay. Councillor Madrick, anything?
Not really. The only question I had is obviously the timescale seemed quite vague. What's the? Obviously, this won't be concurrent with like a private funeral, I assume. But what kind of timeframes are you looking at to try and get all this done?
Unfortunately, it's a very difficult subject. Sometimes we can act very quickly, but other times we will have a relative that said, I would like to take over the arrangements, but I need time. And obviously we need to give them some time, but obviously sometimes it's carried on too long, and the relative has come back to us after a period of time and said, I'm sorry, I can't take the arrangements, I'm afraid you'll have to do it. And that's why we've delayed. It's no two cases are the same. Our only proviso is we try to do it as soon as possible. But obviously, with all the paperwork, with the coroner, there are, as you know, Councillor Madrick, sometimes the paperwork does take over. But unfortunately, I couldn't give you a definitive timescale. But our aim is to try and do it as soon as possible.
Sure.
Just a quick one. I think we have 0.6 full-time employee. Okay, so my query was, are we able to accommodate that to all the deceased people or those who passed away? Is that enough time, or do we struggle with that time?
So regulatory services, they all share each other's responsibilities. So the full-time equivalent is shared across the regulatory services. So that if one officer isn't able to do a particular role or visit, another one will pick it up. So it will be covered, but it is a cost pressure. You can't keep on asking a service to go on doing more and more and give it less and less, which is obviously what's been going on for the last 10 years or so, but they have adapted so that they cover each other's responsibilities, from trading standards through environmental health to this particular police and Proceeds of Crime Act and so on. So it will get covered, but it is a cost pressure, clearly.
And the service is available 7 days or 5 days?
I'll let Steve comment on that. I know that it didn't necessarily over the weekend.
I think our funeral directors do operate 7 days a week, and obviously, if they are informed of a death, they will operate. But what normally happens is in the initial circumstances, I think the coroner's funeral director will collect the body and hold it if it's over a weekend or a bank holiday. Or out of hours, and then they will contact us at the next available moment, and then that's our process sort of kicks into action.
Nobody just gets left lying there, All right. And it's done with greatest, respect for the individual, the person who has died. Right, but there have been no, so this is a really important service, and the reason I wanted it brought here and teased out was to show people this is another aspect of what the City Council does, an important service, and it costs money, and the fact that it's people who have passed away in difficult circumstances do get looked after. I'd like to thank the officers for what they do around this. I'm also aware that members, I don't think it happens very much, but members are encouraged to attend the community funerals. It doesn't happen very often, I understand, which is why I asked about the MIS thing, so that members can be better informed. I accept the argument about MIS made about sensitivity and so on, but I do think that I'm going to add another recommendation to the report, and that is wherever practicable, details of the community funerals, the time, date and location, but not the names, will be emailed to the relevant ward councillors in whichever authority that they are from, inviting them to attend, giving details of the funeral, etc. I'm also going to add a third recommendation, which is that I hear what we hear. I hear the information I've been given about Havant, Gosport, Fareham, and all these other local authorities. So I'm going to add a recommendation that financial and regulatory officers will meet with their opposite numbers in the surrounding local authorities that are covered by QA Hospital to find a resolution to ensuring that they cover the cost of the community funerals, which currently Portsmouth does, where people have lived in their area and subsequently died in QA. Words to that effect, Steve. All right? Is there anything else anyone wants to add? No? All right, I think that's about it now. That's an important subject, and I think it's fair with the cost of everything going up that we should go to these other local authorities and ask them to share in the responsibility. Shah.
Yeah, just a quick one, sorry. Just in regards to the cost, that was 1,300, now 1,800, that's a big jump. And I mean, that is not with the passage of time, it is one jump from 13 to 1,800. How did we cope before with 1,300 and now 1,800 all of a sudden?
Well, these things have to be afforded regardless. So, we'll have to look at what the cost pressure is at the budget time. All right? And that ends the meeting. Much obliged for coming.